Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras here with ILTV's Morning Briefing.
A Palestinian man from Gaza was apprehended by Israeli police this morning as the unarmed man illegally crossed the barrier into Israel. Thanks to the high amount of sensors and cameras along the fence, the Gaza resident was caught for questioning within a few moments of his crossing, as is usually the case. The man had no reported ill intent and was most likely attempting to simply flee the strip, as 3 more like him attempted to do just last month. But the IDF isn't taking any chances with crosses from the Hamas-controlled territory. Yesterday, a drone flying from the strip infiltrated Israeli airspace and was taken in for investigation. It isn't yet clear whether or not this drone belongs to the Hamas terror group, but Hamas has been caught importing and using unmanned aerial vehicles to gather intelligence in the past. Earlier this weekend, 3 Palestinians and an Israeli were injured when clashes between Israeli settlers and Palestinians broke out in Hebron. The Friday scuffles were interrupted by Israeli security forces who responded quickly to the scene. In an alleged video of the scene released by the Hamas-affiliated Shehab news agency, the 2 rivaling groups could be seen shouting and trying to attack one another, as the IDF keeps them separated. Hebron is a scene of fairly frequent clashes between Israelis and Palestinians, and tensions are also still high following 2.5 weeks of clashes at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and a tragic attack in Chalamish. Then, later in the weekend on Saturday night, a group of Palestinian gunmen fired upon IDF soldiers in an attempted attack near Beit El in the West Bank. No injuries have been reported, but the attackers escaped, leading to heavy searches in the area. The Taylor Force Act, which would cut the vast majority of financial aid to the Palestinian Authority from the United States, is getting new legs today as Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer adds his name to the list of co-sponsors for the bill. The legislation aims to disincentivize PA payments to terrorists and their families by slashing all but humanitarian aid and security assistance from the nearly $500 million a year budget. That leaves just over $60 million left. The bill is enjoying near complete bipartisan support, as every Republican and most Democrats are supporting the measure, especially after its revised edition passed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee vote last week. Newly added provisions ensure that payments for humanitarian needs and security efforts would not be hurt by the budget cuts, and that the difference in payments, over $400 million, would go into an escrow account for 1 year pending changes in Palestinian policy. Senator Chuck Schumer released a statement reading that Palestinian President Abbas, quote, must be held accountable for the PA's record of incitement and must stop subsidizing terror. It's abhorrent that the PA provides payments to terrorists and families of those who have committed terror violence against Israelis and Americans and others. I am a proud co-sponsor of the Taylor Force Act because it aims to put an end to this disturbing practice." End quote. One of Prime Minister Netanyahu's closest allies, former Chief of Staff Ari Haro, has just flipped against him. Haro has just agreed to give police first-hand evidence in 2 corruption cases against Netanyahu in exchange for immunity, and now it looks like the police may be ready to file indictments against the Prime Minister. For many, this is looking like the beginning of the end for Netanyahu, though the Prime Minister took to Facebook to show his poker face. But nearly 2,000 protesters were outside the home of Israel's Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit last night, demanding an end to Netanyahu once and for all. Several Knesset members were also there calling for Netanyahu's removal. Meanwhile, a small crowd of the Prime Minister's supporters gathered nearby to protest the protesters, calling them, quote, against the rule of law. As Israel braces for the results of Haro's testimony, it's clear that this is already making major waves, and that a big change might be on the way. According to the Israel Meteorological Service, this last July has been one of the hottest on record since the recording began nearly 100 years ago. Nearly every day of the month was recorded as abnormally hot, 3 periods were classified as heat waves, and regardless of whether coastal or inland, all of Israel saw a 1 to 2 degrees Celsius rise in temperatures above normal. The only other July in recent years to be this hot was in 2012, but in some recording locations, this year was hotter. In fact, the only 2 months objectively hotter than this last July were the Augusts of 2010 and 2015, which are the 2 hottest months on record in Israel, period. Most of the record-hitting months in Israel have been recorded within the latter part of this decade, and meteorologists at the IMS are using the data as further evidence for their theory of global climate change.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.